onto the topic du semaine, or de la semaine, right? Colon cancer, colonoscopy, and other ways of screening. So I think I told you that, I interviewed the president of the Colon Cancer Foundation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you know that there's a lot of early onset, like they're finding people younger and younger, 18 years old,
What?
17 years old.
That I didn't know. I've been hearing that it's getting younger, like more like people in their 30s and even 20s.
Yeah.
That I didn't hear.
What's
that about? What did she say about that?
Which means you have to, if you have high risk, you've got to have the conversation with your teenager, for heaven's sake.
Oh,
Like,
man.
at what age do you have that conversation? 13, 15, and they're not sure what this explosion is. They're looking at different reasons, but, a couple of questions that I had for her were like, 45 is great, because that was what the meeting was about, that they're,
Right.
They're happy to say that the screening guidelines had now say, 45 instead of 50. And then there's no real, doctors will say every 5 years if you're high risk.
Okay.
But there really is no guideline. The American College of Gastroenterology doesn't really, no, sorry, the American Cancer Society does not really have, they don't really have a guideline of how often, what frequency you should do it. They leave that kind of up to your doctor and your history and stuff. But if you have symptoms, they say, you should absolutely get.
What are the symptoms?
So symptoms really range and vary. Weight loss.
Oh.
Pain, back pain. Depends on where it is, inability to eat. Chronic constipation, which I know that doesn't,
Mm-hmm.
I think the point is that if you have the bleeding, rectal bleeding, or vomiting, or, the symptoms just vary. It's a wide range of symptoms, but if you have any symptoms that are, are out of the ordinary, that you should absolutely discuss them with your doctor. And then your doctor should absolutely say, okay, I'm going to send you for, colorectal cancer screening or endoscopy, or something. But, even the thing though is, like, even if you do that, what happens if, like, say Chadwick Boseman, so 45 is great, but what he died at 43 and he was diagnosed with stage 3.
Right, in his prime, a man in his prime.
Yeah,
that's just unbelievable.
Yeah,
but apparently not that unbelievable.
Right. Yeah, because so many people, now she said that there's 21 million more people now, yes, as a result of this change, that.
Wait, what?
21 million.
That.
Yeah, she said 21 million, more people now in the healthcare system that need care for colorectal cancer as a result of,
wow.
as a result of A, the change, and B, just younger and younger people, developing the disease. It's terrible. It's terrible.
That's a huge number.
Yeah. My neighbor, she was recently diagnosed with, it was stage 0 to stage 1.
Okay.
Scary. But the freaky part about it was that she, so year 0, like we'll call it year 0, she had a clean colonoscopy.
Okay.
Years 1 through 4 was when she lost weight.
Okay.
An unexplained weight loss. Lost weight. She started having symptoms. She started having rectal bleeding, and she went to the doctor, and they removed the polyps, and every single one of her polyps tested positive for cancer. Because, you know, they go in, they snip.
So between year 1, which was clear, and year 3, year 4,
Year
all that
4.
happened?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's fast.
Yeah. And so thank goodness it was just stage 0, stage 1, but she wasn't due back for her next colonoscopy until
What
2022.
made her go? Oh, because she had symptoms?
Because she had
Is
symptoms. But what if
What
she
if
didn't
she
have
didn't
symptoms?
have symptoms?
Exactly.
Oh,
Exactly.
wow.
That is absolutely scary. You know, I'm not.
Do we
That's
know if she
scary.
had a family history? Is
She
that
does
why
have
she
a family
was so
history.
like paying
Her
attention?
mother died of colon cancer. They found that out, you know, post-mortem. They found that because they didn't know, they thought it was hemorrhoids,
Wow.
you know. And then when they went in afterwards, they're like, oh yeah, it was colon cancer.
Wow.
Yeah. But with that history, you know, her doctor felt comfortable saying, okay, see you in 5 years.
Oh, that makes me want to schedule one right away.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And what, I mean, I'm not even, she's okay though. She's okay. She had, you know, she had the resection surgery, and she is wrapping up her chemo. So that's great. But it's, you know, I just go back to like, suppose
That.
she didn't have symptoms, you know? So I don't know. What do you think?
That's crazy.
Yeah. So screening is starting earlier at 45, which I think is great. I wish it were 40, you know. But you know,
What's the is there an organization that allows that, you know, informs you when you should be getting it, when you should be getting your screenings, and are they changing
well,
what
so
the paradigm is?
so the American College of Gastroenterology, they've been making recommendations since 2005 to lower the age from 50 to 45. Um, but because it was, you know, a lot, they were finding a lot of Black people were coming, you know, were being diagnosed with colorectal cancer, and their prognoses weren't that great. You know, it was, they were dying a lot more than their white counterparts. And so they pleaded in 2005, and then they pleaded again in 2008. So what is that? That's like 16 and what? My math is terrible. 16 and 13 years ago, they've been pleading for this. And only just now, the United States Prevention Services Task Force finally said, okay, let's make it 45 for everyone. But just let that sink in for a second. 13 years, 16 years, 16 years of pleading with them. Because what happens is the insurance companies, they take their cues from the USPSTF.
Okay.
So they don't cover anything if they don't say, look, it's got to be covered. I mean, and states can mandate that, you know, certain things be covered, but ultimately, you know, they take their cues from that agency, from that task force.
So if there hadn't been some task force or some agency, what would be the protocol? We don't even necessarily.
The protocol would be 50 for, I mean, they were still saying, look, if you're African American, you need to start screening at 45. You know, if you have family history, you need to get screened at 45. But it was not universal. It was just, if you have a family history, if you have a genetic predisposition, and if you're African American, for God's sakes, don't wait till 50. I don't know how doctors, how gastroenterologists, I don't know if they disseminated that information or if it was just like a case by case scenario. Like, I know, you know, years ago I went to, because I have the BRCA2 mutation, which predisposes me for not just breast cancer, but, you know, also colorectal cancer, pancreatic cancer, ovarian cancer, take your pick, dealer's choice. So I immediately, when I got that diagnosis, I started seeing all these different doctors because I wanted to be on the preventive side of things. And you know, the gastroenterologist said to me, you're still too young. I would wait. Yeah. So she wanted me to wait till I was 45. Yeah. And so I had to wait. I didn't have any symptoms or anything like that. But what was that your experience? Like, when did you first get screened?
Well, because I had that stage 1B of the endometrial. And so then they said, after I had my surgery, they said, you have to go get a colonoscopy. But I haven't done one since. It was all clear. I gotta, especially after that story. Oh my gosh, I gotta schedule that. I gotta get right on that.
Really scared me, But the Chadwick Boseman death, that really was a
man in his prime. You know, look, healthy as a horse appearing. Wow.
Yeah. And all the resources that you can shake a stick at.
And a celebrity, right?
Why this fit, affluent young man should have died from. That's why I keep asking, why not 40? 45?
Why not?
Why not 40?
Is it the money issue? Is it insurance? Is it?
Was saying that there's a formulary they work out.
Okay.
For how they came to 45.
Is it a financial formula?
I didn't ask her that. That's a good question, though. I should have asked her that. Huh. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. I wish I would have, thought to ask her that question, but that's because that's a very good question. And then I asked her about, like, what can people do in between, the years?
Yeah, what can we do in between?
So she talked about stool DNA testing, which is like the really new conversation that people.
Okay.
So you've heard of Cologuard, I'm sure, right?
Briefly.
Yeah, it was like the little commercial with the little box,
yes.
the white box with the blue, and he's like, "Oh, I had Cologuard," So there's Cologuard. I know, right? But basically, if you swipe and you send it to the lab, and they'll let you know if they find any cancerous, DNA in your fecal sample.
How effective do they? How reliable is that? Do they know how reliable that is? What do they claim?
What does Cologuard claim?
Yeah, do we know what they claim? Like what their reliability is? Yeah.
Let me see. Cologuard. Efficacy of Cologuard versus colonoscopy. Let me see. So Cologuard can only detect 42% of large polyps.
Okay.
While a colonoscopy can detect 95% of large polyps.
Oh, but it is something to do while you're waiting for your colonoscopy.
But why would they detect polyps? They're supposed to detect cancer cells.
Are all polyps cancerous?
No, they're not. They're not. I mean, when they remove them, which is what the colonoscopy, which is why it's the gold standard. They remove the polyps, and then they biopsy them. And I mean, having polyps is not a great thing, but it's not, you've got cancer. So they remove them, and then that, is a preventive, type measure. They biopsy them, and if they come back cancerous, then it's okay, you've got cancer. But if the Cologuard sort of does the same thing, I'm not sure that that's. Is what I'm saying makes sense?
Are you concerned that it's like
talking about a camera,
it's a
camera with a loop at the end that goes into your rectum and travels through your large colon, and then it grabs a hold of any polyps and just snips them and pulls them out. Cologuard is external. It's basically looking for traces. It's looking for evidence of cancer.
Okay.
From your stool, which if your stool is moving through your system and you've got cancer cells, it's going to bring them out, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I understand what they're saying.
Are you concerned it's a false sense of security?
What the
Cologuard?
No, I don't think so. I think it's
something to do in the meantime.
I think I think you should have your first colonoscopy or virtual colonoscopy, which is what I had. Oh, I have to tell you about that.
That I want to hear about.
I got I'm sorry, let me finish my thought.
Okay.
So you have your colonoscopy, and then in between, you have your stool or your blood tests to check for cancer. And then if there's some change, then you go back in, you have another colonoscopy.
Okay.
Right? So it should be something you do. Or if you're afraid of or uncomfortable with, that kind of an invasive procedure, you do that. And then it's like, okay, what are you going to
Okay.
do? It's either, okay, great, I'm okay, and I'll do it again in another year. Or, okay, I've got something here. I'm going to have to decide now, am I going to do this? Do I want to save my life? So virtual colonoscopy. So I had a virtual colonoscopy. I was originally going to have a colonoscopy, but then when I found out about this virtual colonoscopy,
I had never heard about that before you brought that up.
I had never heard about it until, this place in New Jersey mentioned it on their website. And I was like, why didn't anyone tell me about this? How could people not, my doctor didn't even know about the procedure.
Wow.
I had to tell him, like, just give me the referral, But the reason that I decided to do the virtual colonoscopy as opposed to the regular colonoscopy was because there is a tendency for, especially if your colon prep is suboptimal, for the loop not to make it all the way to the end of your descending colon into your cecal.
Okay.
And so what research has found is that people of color, Black people, have tend to have their cancers on that right side.
So they're sampling the wrong side, or they're not sampling all the sides.
Right. So what happens is a lot of doctors are looking on the left side, which is where most, white people, people of European heritage, ancestry, people of European ancestry, they tend to have it on the left side in the descending colon side. People of color, Black people, tend to have it on the ascending colon.
So they're only sampling one side.
They're not only sampling one side, they are sending it through and going. Okay. They're supposed to go the entire length. They don't always make it all the way down there, is what's happening. Okay. And so they're missing those cancers. Yeah. Wow. And so that scared me. Yeah. And so that scared the bejesus out of me. And I said, okay, I want something that's going to get an image of everything, and if I have to follow up if they find polyps and I have to follow up with a regular colonoscopy afterwards, I'll do that because those polyps need to be removed. So, getting the whole picture to me was more important than them going in and maybe missing the end. The other thing I found out that was very interesting about myself was I have something called redundant colon, which is essentially the average colon length is about 5 feet. Okay. My colon is longer than 5 feet. Okay. So there would
a natural variant. Right.
Right. Okay. And so that would have opened me up if I went and done the regular colonoscopy.
How would they have known?
They would not have known because I would not have known to tell them that. And I found that out doing the virtual colonoscopy. Ooh. So I'm actually going to end up doing a regular colonoscopy because they didn't factor in that I might have a longer colon. They didn't put enough of the CO2 into my system to inflate sufficiently because they do it based on the average colon of 5 feet. So I wasn't fully inflated. From what they could see, I didn't have any polyps, but I need to be 100% certain. So now that I'm armed with this information, I am going to follow up and have a regular colonoscopy, and I'm going to have a conversation with the gastroenterologist and say, and by the way, I have redundant colon. What's your plan going to be for how you're going to approach my colonoscopy? So now I can have an educated conversation with the,
Well, that was productive.
yeah. So that's the one good thing that came out of it. Unfortunately, it was done by, and now I'm not knocking the young lady. She was, she was very professional. She was very helpful. But that's kind of why, some gastroenterologists are like, because my gastroenterologist, when I said I want to do that, she's like, find another doctor then, because I don't agree with you. Yeah. She didn't cater for this variation in my anatomy. She did what she normally does. She puts in, the CO2 and water for 5 feet of colon. I mean, I don't know how many extra feet of colon that I have, but had she put in more, but there was no way for her to know, because it's not like an MRI where you get immediate.
It needed to be imaged to begin with.
Right,
Okay.
exactly. Well, she did have initial images because they wanted to make sure that my colon prep was, optimal so that they can see. So she went and brought it to the what is radiologist. She went and brought it to the radiologist to make sure that I could even go through with it, because if it's not optimal, they can't do it. There's just no point.
It's quite a production.
Well, going inside the body is always a production. But yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, and it took something that should have been a half hour in total and turned it into well over an hour, because she couldn't get a hold of the doctor. And then, she's insufflating me. She doesn't know that she's not fully insufflating me, and she's taking these images. So that's why they want me to come back and do it again. But if it's gonna be the same experience, there's just no point. Also, how much CO2 can you put into a person safely, right? I'm still, 5'5", 135 pounds. Like,
right.
I don't know how much more that would be safe for me. So I think at this point, it's better for me to follow up with gastroenterologists, arm them with that information, and say, okay, what's your plan? Because I don't want you to miss going down into this area. Do you have to pipe an extra however many feet to get there? So that's what's that's what's going on there. It's quite a production. Quite a production, I know. What are you gonna? But once I get it established, it's established, right?
Yes.
I'm not happy.
And you learned something important, the redundant business. That's really, it's relevant.
Yeah. It could have also been a situation. They have something called tortuous, where it's all twisted and stuff.
Oh,
they didn't
twisted.
find that. Yeah.
Okay.
Where it's just so convoluted and so like they can't, they would have a hard time snaking it in. I don't think that that's the case, because that's not what was reported in the impression. But the extra, that was a bit surprising. And then they also said that my prep was suboptimal, which
what?
Testing.
But you're so vigilant. I know it wasn't suboptimal.
But it's possible that because I didn't know that I had a redundant colon, because there was, everything that came up was clear. But it's possible that the standard prep was not sufficient.
Was not adequate. Okay.
Right. So it's not that I necessarily did anything wrong. It's just nobody could know that I had this extra foot or feet of colon. So I don't really blame anyone for that. I just have to start over and do it, because I have to establish a baseline.
Smart.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. I've just, and then after that, I can mess around with stool testing or what have you. But, I need to make sure that what they saw is what it really is. They didn't see any polyps. They saw nothing. That's fine. I need to be 100% sure.
So the whole thing was like 30 minutes or 60 minutes?
So the whole thing in total, if everything is normal, and you have, optimal bowel prep, everything is clear, you don't have, tagged feces. It's like, well, the thing with the fecal tags is that they tag the feces so that they know, okay, this is not a polyp, this is actually a piece of feces.
All right, so that takes time for them to tag. Is that what it is?
No, well, what happens is, so they tag it so they can rule it out. So they don't,
Okay,
so if it's a piece of feces, inside of you, they know that it's tagged because it lights up differently than a polyp would light
right,
up.
okay.
The barium or whatever I think it's some sort of barium. And they have you drink it, the night before. They give you 3 doses of it. And basically what it does is if you have any poop left inside of your colon, it lights it up. So
Okay.
they know, okay, this is what I'm seeing here. This is a piece of poo, and this here is not. I think the bottom line is they just didn't factor in or expect that I was going to have this extra
For an
colon,
anatomy.
and then
Okay.
no one catered for that. There was no plan B, like, this doesn't feel, because how can you know? How can you know?
How new is this technology? It sounds pretty new.
I think it's about like a little over 5 years or something like that. I was reading from the gastroenterology journal, where it was a clinical, paper talking about how when someone has tortuous or redundant colon, that they, if it's a difficult, well, the paper was about what happens when there's a difficult colonoscopy.
Okay.
Difficult being that, you might have a situation like me where you have a redundant colon, or you have a tortuous colon where they can't get the scope all the way, because the goal is to get it all the way to the end, to the cecum, and if they can't get it all the way there, then that's not a successful colonoscopy.
It's not a complete colonoscopy.
It's not a complete colonoscopy, right? And so then in that case, they recommend having a virtual colonoscopy. So this may have been around longer than thought. Maybe it's just been perfected over the last, but I'm telling you, my doctor didn't even know about it, had no idea.
The same.
Yeah, the president of
The prep and the time, it's similar. It's different.
Same prep, same time,
Okay.
but instead of having to go under anesthesia and making sure
That's a big deal. Some
you walk
people
away from it,
really-
right? You walk away and you get up and it's like you go, you evacuate, you pass the air,
You evacuate, yes.
and
Part of the fun.
life, exactly,
Right.
And the other reason I'm contesting this whole idea of suboptimal is because for the rest of that day, everything was clear, completely clear. So if I really had suboptimal, wouldn't something have come out? Something would have come out, right? So but in any event, the bottom line was they couldn't do it properly because no one knew that I was going to have an extra long colon.
Right.
Oh man. So yeah, so those are the things those are the ways you can protect yourself. You have the colonoscopy, and if you don't want to have the colonoscopy, because some people feel emasculated by it, some people.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Yeah.
Well, it's
That's
an
right.
exit. It's an exit. It's not an entrance. There's that old.
There's that
old-
thinking,
yeah.
as opposed to this is just life-saving and it's just a procedure. It doesn't have special meaning.
Right. But some people feel that way.
Yes.
They feel like it's too invasive. For some people, they're sensitive to the anesthesia, and maybe you could do it without anesthesia, but my God, would you want to, right? You could, but can you imagine things snaking? Yeah, there are people who can't have anesthesia.
Yes.
And so because they can't have anesthesia, they don't want to, or they do local anesthesia, which I don't even know if that's sufficient for that.
I don't know how that works. Yeah.
But some people feel uncomfortable, but at the end of the day, you still have to get screened. You have to get screened somehow.
It's not an option. It has to be done.
You have to, because in this day and age, like I was asking her, well, what factors are leading to this increase in
Yeah, I'd
colorectal?
be very curious to know.
So they're not really sure. They're looking at diet.
Fiber, okay, diet.
Um, you know, I read something interesting on Stat News where it was an article, I can't remember their source, but they talked about that doctors are looking at the intake of high fructose corn syrup.
That seems to be
And
such the bane of our modern times. That high
yeah,
fructose corn syrup.
yeah. And then there's a list of foods that are considered carcinogenic. ASCO, the American Society of Cancer and Oncology, they've come out roundly and said there is no alcohol consumption that is not carcinogenic. They had first
Wow.
put into it and they said, well, use moderation. And then they came out.
So all those blue zones where they're like, drink a little bit of alcohol, but the rest of the diet is fantastic.
But they also have an
Yeah.
excellent diet.
Yes. And exercise and physical. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
They're not exposed to
unprocessed foods. Yes.
Exactly.
Okay.
So if you do have, moderate wine or whatever, I mean, people have been drinking wine for
Right.
centuries, with no problem. So but there's all these cocktails now, there's people are drinking harder liquors.
Right.
It's not just wine anymore. And I'm not putting wine on a pedestal and saying that, but that's what ASCO said. ASCO said,
Okay.
all alcohol carcinogenic. Being obese is also carcinogenic.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're looking at.
Oh, it's so hard out there.
She also said it's, access to care. Like you have a lot of these medical deserts where, if you're in a rural community, say for example, and you just can't get regular care. So that's some of the stuff that is part of the rise. But yeah, so it's a number of things that they're looking at, but they're starting to look at like diet as a possibility. I think they don't want to get sued by the food industries, but they're kind of tiptoeing out and saying we've got to look at the food supply because we don't know what this is, and patients are getting younger and younger and younger, and it's kind of reached epidemic proportions. Nobody wants to say epidemic, but she agrees with me that this is epidemic. These kinds of numbers. I mean, 21 million additional people is nothing to sneeze at. That's a lot of people.
Yeah, you really have to be brave these days to take a stand on things.
Mm-hmm. But what do you do if you're 20 something years old? You don't know that you have a family history, or you don't have a family history that you're.
I'm sure you don't get tested. You wouldn't think about it. Who thinks about that?
Right.
That's like you have to hear people talk about that. Oh, I'm going to get a test, or you have some relative who went and had it done, and that makes you think about that's a possibility for the future of something that you would do also. If you've never heard of these tests, who would think of it? Did you ever think about that when you were like in your teens?
No, I didn't.
No,
not at all. And this is not. And she asked me an interesting question. Because I've been doing all of this surveillance and so forth. And she asked me, when your gynecologist told you that you were positive for the BRCA gene mutation, why didn't your doctor also tell you? Because he's like, okay, that means that you're susceptible to breast cancer, higher risk for breast cancer, higher risk for ovarian cancer. Why didn't he also tell you that you are higher risk for colorectal cancer? I didn't find it out from my gynecologist.
You did not.
I found it out from the breast oncologist because the breast oncologist ran through all of that with me. And I was so stunned to hear that I had, it also, skin cancer also.
Skin cancer too?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. So I see all of these doctors, you know.
Is that because the gynecologist was not an oncologist? Do you think that might be part of it?
Yeah, but that's true. But these are
But at this
frontline people.
point, they should all be, it's all,
Right,
yeah,
and that's the point that she was making.
okay.
Because these are
Because
frontline people.
That's frontline,
Right.
frontline.
The majority of patients are seen by gynecologists, primary care doctors.
Right, and that's it.
PhDs.
Yes.
Right, exactly. You know, and that's it, exactly. And so why aren't they, because I was asking her, like, whose responsibility is it to have this conversation? Is it just that?
That's a good question, yes.
And she said, yeah, it's kind of a little bit of both. So, you know, we're going to see what we could do to try to, you know, raise awareness, because, you know, this is something that's like extremely serious, you know, and no one can take this for granted. I mean, we saw like what happened with Chadwick Boseman. That was completely stunning. Now you've got 30-year-olds going in and getting their first colonoscopy.
I really just am so curious about diet and all that related,
Yeah.
all the secondary things we get
Yeah.
exposed to.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, that's
Yeah.
definitely huge. But what do you do? I mean, what do you do? One thing they have found is that a vegetarian diet,
Yeah.
very protective. So, you know, you're not going to, they found that vegetarians don't come down with the cancers that meat eaters.
I'm making a little note. Not that I haven't heard that before, but yeah, that's.
I mean, that's something to think. So I have definitely decreased my meat intake. Decreased. Yeah, I can't go totally meatless. Like, you know, I've got autoimmune issues, you know. So that's it for today.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline.
Thank you very much, Samara.
And we'll speak again next week about new adventures in medicine and medical research.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Take
bye.
care. See you next time. Bye.